Pride is loud. It demands recognition, applause, and validation from a world too distracted to care. It wants to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be right, even if that means losing peace. Dignity, on the other hand, does not shout. It does not chase, and it does not explain. It walks away quietly, carrying with it the kind of strength that pride will never understand. Pride feeds the ego, but dignity feeds the soul. Pride needs witnesses to survive. Dignity survives even in silence. The paradox is that the more we act out of pride, the more we lose the very respect we're trying to protect. Pride tries to convince the world of our value, while dignity simply knows it. One is reactive, the other is sovereign. One hurts, the other heals. Pride says, "I'll show them." Dignity says, "I'll show myself." But the moment you choose pride over dignity, you begin to destroy your inner balance because pride ties your worth to the reactions of others. Dignity frees you from them. It is the difference between fighting to be respected and embodying respect, between seeking validation and being validation itself. Pride is a mask built to hide insecurity, while dignity is the quiet acceptance of truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable. You can feel pride when you're winning, but you only find dignity when you've lost and still refuse to lose yourself. Most people don't understand this difference, and that's why they spend their lives in emotional battles that drain their power. Pride will make you argue with people who don't deserve your voice. It will make you stay in relationships that no longer respect you, just so you can prove a point. It will push you to show strength when the strongest thing you could do is walk away. Pride is addicted to being right. Dignity doesn't need to be. There's a reason pride feels heavy. It's because it chains you to outcomes. Dignity feels light because it depends on nothing external. It is rooted in self-respect, not self-importance. When you live through pride, every challenge becomes a threat to your identity. When you live through dignity, every challenge becomes a chance to demonstrate grace. One is born of fear of being overlooked, underestimated, forgotten. The other is born of peace with who you are, even if no one else understands it. Pride is built on illusion, dignity is built on truth. And truth never needs defending. The world is filled with people ruled by pride, people who mistake stubbornness for strength and arrogance for confidence. They don't realize that the louder they shout, the smaller they look. Real strength doesn't perform, it endures. Pride may win arguments, but dignity wins respect. Pride makes you say things you'll regret. Dignity teaches you the power of silence. Pride crumbles when ignored. Dignity grows in the quiet. There is a psychological pattern that explains why pride hurts so much. The ego, once challenged, perceives rejection as death. To protect itself, it reacts with anger, defensiveness, and projection. That's pride. The ego's desperate attempt to keep control of a narrative it's already losing. But dignity sees rejection for what it is, redirection. It doesn't fight to change others' perceptions. It observes, learns, and adjusts without complaint. Pride is loud because it's afraid. Dignity is calm because it knows. When someone disrespects you, pride wants revenge. Dignity wants distance. Pride seeks control. Dignity seeks clarity. Pride says you must prove them wrong. Dignity says you don't need to. That's why dignity heals. It removes you from the emotional battlefield entirely. You stop bleeding energy into meaningless confrontations. You stop justifying your worth to those who cannot see it. You stop apologizing for protecting your peace. In doing so, you rise above the noise. But that rise is invisible to the world. No one claps when you choose dignity. No one congratulates you for staying silent instead of retaliating. That's what makes it so powerful. It's a victory witnessed only by your higher self. Pride is concerned with how others see you. Dignity is concerned with how you see yourself when you're alone. The deepest form of power is self-respect, not self-assertion. Because once you respect yourself, no one can take that from you. Not rejection, not betrayal, not silence. You begin to see that not every battle deserves your presence. You realize that dignity is not weakness. It's a refusal to play a game that costs your peace. There is a point in every person's life when they must choose. To win with pride or to heal with dignity. To react or to respond. to prove, or to evolve. The difference determines your entire emotional maturity. Pride belongs to the child within you, the one that still wants to be right. Dignity belongs to the adult, the one that wants to be free. The transformation begins when you stop needing to prove that you've changed and simply live differently. When your silence becomes your response and your actions replace explanations, that's when dignity becomes your armor. People will misunderstand you. They will test you. They will provoke you, hoping to pull you back into chaos. But dignity doesn't bite the bait. It knows that reacting to disrespect is like fighting in mud. Even if you win, you're still dirty. So it chooses detachment. It chooses stillness. It chooses the quiet authority of presence. Because dignity isn't the absence of emotion. It's the mastery of it. It's the ability to stand in pain without becoming pain, to acknowledge hurt without needing to inflict it back, to see rejection as redirection, to understand that losing someone who disrespected your value is not a loss, but a correction. Pride can't handle that truth. Pride wants to fight for what's already gone. It wants closure, apology, revenge. Dignity simply accepts. It knows that silence often speaks louder than confrontation. It knows that walking away is not running, it's reclaiming energy. It's saying, my peace matters more than your validation. And that is power. The kind of power that doesn't have to declare itself. The kind of power that people feel when you enter a room, calm, centered, untouchable. Pride seeks to dominate. Dignity commands naturally. Pride reacts. Dignity governs. Pride drains. Dignity restores. Pride hurts because it demands from others what only you can give yourself: respect. Dignity heals because it gives you back what you forgot was yours: control over your own peace. And the deeper you understand this, the more you realize that the war between pride and dignity is really a war between your lower and higher self. The ego fights for survival. The soul fights for peace. The ego screams. The soul whispers. And when you learn to listen to the whisper instead of the noise, you become untouchable. The more you feed pride, the more you suffer. The more you feed dignity, the freer you become. That is the silent evolution of the self. The moment you stop being reactive and start being reflective. The moment you stop trying to win and start trying to understand. The moment you realize that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the absence of ego. Dignity is what remains when you stop fighting for the wrong things. It's what stays when pride collapses under its own weight. It's what allows you to sleep at night, knowing you didn't betray yourself to prove a point. The truth is simple but hard. Pride will cost you relationships, opportunities, and peace. Dignity will cost you your ego, catch you, but give you everything else. So choose wisely. Every argument, every rejection, every disappointment is a test. Will you respond from pride or from dignity? Will you defend or detach? Will you shout or stay silent? The answer determines whether you heal or stay hurt. Pride hurts because it ties your worth to winning. Dignity heals because it reminds you that your worth was never up for debate. Pride thrives on illusion. It tells you that walking away means losing, that silence means weakness, and that forgiving means surrender. But dignity knows the truth. Walking away is control. Silence is composure, and forgiveness is liberation. Pride tries to preserve your image. Dignity preserves your essence. When you act through pride, you are performing. When you act through dignity, you are transforming. Pride wants the world to see your worth. Dignity already knows it without needing witnesses. The difference is subtle but enormous. Pride is reactive, dignity is sovereign. You can feel this difference in your body. Pride feels tight, restless, and agitated. Dignity feels grounded, still, and deliberate. Pride rushes to prove, while dignity pauses to understand. The prideful mind is ruled by comparison, obsessed with how others perceive it. The dignified mind is ruled by clarity, detached from the need to be seen. In that detachment lies true freedom. Because what can be taken from you when you no longer depend on others to confirm who you are? Pride demands recognition, but dignity commands it without effort. The proud person needs to be right. The dignified person needs to be real. One chases appearances, The other embodies authenticity. The tragedy of pride is that it isolates you from growth. It convinces you that admitting fault equals humiliation, when in reality, it's evolution. Pride builds walls. Dignity builds character. Pride hides insecurity under arrogance, but dignity hides strength under silence. People often confuse the two because they mistake intensity for power. Pride is loud intensity. Dignity is quiet power. One burns quickly, the other endures. Pride will push you to say what should remain unspoken, to fight what should be released, to prove what should be self-evident. Dignity will stop you in that moment, whispering that some battles are not meant to be fought. They are meant to be transcended. Every human being encounters that crossroad, when insult meets silence, when rejection meets calm, when provocation meets stillness. Pride screams for reaction. Dignity smiles at the test. Because when you learn to control the impulse to prove your worth, you prove your evolution. Pride says, "They disrespected me. I must respond." Dignity says they disrespected themselves. I must not descend. And in that restraint lies the highest form of strength. Pride wants to dominate others. Dignity only seeks to master the self. That's why pride hurts. It's always at war with the external. Dignity heals. It makes peace within. You begin to understand that there is no need to fight for respect when you embody it, no need to chase attention when your presence speaks for itself. The energy of pride is noisy and chaotic. The energy of dignity is silent and magnetic. People feel it even when you say nothing. That's why those who act with dignity often make others uneasy, because dignity exposes insecurity without confrontation. It mirrors the emotional chaos of the proud and forces them to see what they lack. You don't need to correct them. You just need to be still. That is the secret power of dignity. It teaches through example, not reaction. It doesn't argue, it demonstrates. It doesn't announce boundaries. It enforces them effortlessly. Pride seeks revenge, dignity seeks release. Pride says, "I'll make them regret it." Dignity says, "I'll make peace with it." Pride fights for validation. Dignity fights for peace. Pride looks outward. Dignity looks inward. The proud person burns bridges to prove power. The dignified person builds distance to preserve peace. One destroys, the other detaches. And detachment is not indifference, it is mastery. It is the art of remaining emotionally unaffected by what you cannot control. That's what dignity understands, that the greatest weapon against disrespect is indifference guided by awareness. Pride is blind rage. Dignity is disciplined silence. The difference is control. Control is power. And power that doesn't need to prove itself is untouchable. You see, the proud person's identity is built on others' opinions. If they're admired, they feel strong. If they're criticized, they collapse. Dignity, however, is built on self-respect, independent of applause or attack. It is rooted in principles, not emotions. It acts from values, not from wounds. That's why dignity heals, because it reconnects you with your true center. It brings you back to yourself when the ego tries to pull you outward. Pride wants the last word. Dignity doesn't need a word at all. Pride competes with others. Dignity competes with yesterday's version of itself. Pride blames, dignity reflects. Pride inflates, dignity refines. There is an elegance in that refinement, an invisible grace that no amount of arrogance can imitate. You can see it in how people carry themselves. Pride needs to be noticed. Dignity makes others notice without trying. It's the difference between noise and presence. Pride fears humiliation. Dignity has already transcended it, because when you've faced yourself, when you've confronted your own flaws without flinching, no external judgment can shake you. That's the paradox. The more you face your own truth, the less anyone's opinion matters. That's dignity. It is not built on denial, but on deep self-acceptance. Pride hides pain. Dignity transforms it. Pride hides weakness. Dignity integrates it. And what you integrate, you no longer fear. Pride builds fragile confidence. Dignity builds unshakable peace. People often ask how to know whether they are acting from pride or from dignity. The answer is simple. Pride always feels urgent. Dignity always feels calm. Pride speaks first. Dignity listens. Pride wants to be seen winning. Dignity doesn't care who's watching. When you begin to live from dignity, something shifts in your energy. You stop explaining your choices. You stop chasing understanding. You stop arguing with ignorance. You start valuing your silence more than others' approval. You become selective with your energy, not because you think you're better, but because you finally understand that peace is priceless. Pride hurts because it creates dependency on opinions, reactions, outcomes. Dignity heals because it creates autonomy. It gives you the rarest form of freedom, emotional independence. You stop letting people's chaos invade your inner world. You stop lowering your standards to be understood. You stop confusing kindness with tolerance of disrespect. And when that happens, you'll notice something profound. Your circle gets smaller, but your peace gets larger. Pride attracts the crowd. Dignity attracts solitude. But solitude is where you meet your real power. Pride wants an audience. Dignity wants alignment. Pride will make you shout your worth to the world. Dignity will make you quietly build a life that reflects it. One needs validation, the other needs vision. The proud person says, "Look at me." The dignified person says, "I'll show you through time." And time always reveals who truly had power. Dignity is patient. Pride is impulsive. That's why pride often burns out quickly, while dignity endures. People who operate through dignity don't need to rush revenge, because they understand that life itself reveals truth. Time exposes deception, silence reveals character, and patience restores balance. Pride doesn't trust time. It wants instant justice. Dignity knows that patience is justice in disguise. You don't have to destroy anyone who wronged you. Just move on and let their own behavior speak louder than your response. That's dignity. Control through surrender, victory through restraint. Pride creates noise, dignity creates silence. But that silence is not emptiness, it is authority. It's the kind of silence that unsettles those who depend on your reaction to feel relevant. It's the silence that says, "You no longer have access to my energy." And nothing is more powerful than that. Pride hurts because it keeps you tied to the scene of your pain, replaying it, reliving it, retelling it. Dignity heals because it walks away and never looks back. It doesn't erase the memory, but it no longer lets it define the present. It learns, integrates, and moves on, lighter, quieter, wiser. Every time you choose dignity over pride, you evolve. You rise above your past self. You reclaim a piece of your energy that was once wasted on noise. That's the real definition of healing, not forgetting but outgrowing. Pride clings, dignity releases. Pride controls, dignity allows. Pride is noise, dignity is peace. The lesson is simple. Pride hurts because it fights reality. Dignity heals because it accepts it. Acceptance is not defeat, it's transformation. It's what turns pain into wisdom and loss into clarity. You don't rise by winning arguments. You rise by mastering your reactions. You rise by keeping your soul intact while everything else falls apart. You rise by choosing dignity when pride begs you to scream. That's the invisible crown, the one no one sees but everyone feels. It's the quiet authority of someone who has nothing to prove and nothing to fear. That's the essence of dignity. There comes a moment in life when pride will tempt you to defend what no longer deserves defense. It whispers that letting go means weakness. That silence means defeat. That walking away means you've lost something important. But the truth is the opposite. Every time you choose to defend your peace instead of your pride, you gain something far greater: self-respect. That is what dignity truly is, the invisible force that holds you together when everything external tries to pull you apart. Pride seeks to win the world. Dignity seeks to win the self. Pride wants to conquer others. Dignity wants to master the ego. The reason pride hurts so deeply is because it ties your sense of value to things outside of your control, other people's words, opinions, and recognition. The moment any of those change, your stability collapses. Dignity cannot collapse because it was never built on shifting ground. It was built on principles, on truth, on the quiet knowing that your worth is not dependent on applause or agreement. Pride reacts to disrespect with noise. Dignity responds to disrespect with distance. Pride says, "I'll show them they were wrong." Dignity says, "They've already shown me who they are." And in that distinction lies wisdom. The proud demand closure from others. The dignified create closure within themselves. Because the more you evolve, the less you need explanations. You begin to see that dignity isn't about being right. It's about staying aligned. It's about preserving your inner structure when the world tries to dismantle it. And that is something pride can never do, because pride is fragile. It thrives on validation. Dignity, however, is invincible because it thrives on self-control. The person who can control their emotions controls their world. That's why people who act with dignity seem untouchable. They do not react to emotional manipulation. They don't need to prove their innocence to those committed to misunderstanding them. They don't need to scream their value into the ears of those who are deaf to it. They understand something deeper. Silence is not surrender, it's self-preservation. The world misreads silence as weakness because most people cannot imagine strength without aggression. They think control means domination. But the truest form of control is restraint. The ability to stay composed when the ego begs to explode. That is what separates the powerful from the powerless. The powerful are not those who control others. They are those who control themselves when others can't. That's what dignity teaches. It is emotional self-mastery disguised as detachment. It is wisdom disguised as calmness. It is love disguised as distance. Because when you love yourself enough to protect your peace, you realize that not every situation deserves your reaction. Not every person deserves your explanation, and not every insult deserves your presence. Pride wants to stay and prove. Dignity knows when to leave and evolve. And sometimes evolution means silence. Sometimes healing means disappearance. Pride asks, "What will they think if I don't respond?" Dignity answers, "What will it cost me if I do?" That's the question that changes everything. Because once you start valuing your energy more than your image, your life transforms. Pride operates from insecurity. It cannot stand still in the face of disrespect. Dignity operates from certainty. It doesn't need to engage to affirm its strength. This is why dignity always wins in the long run. It might look like loss at first because silence rarely gets applause, but time always reveals who truly had power. Pride burns fast. Dignity builds forever. Pride wins arguments. Dignity wins peace. Pride inflates the ego. Dignity expands the soul. And peace of soul is the highest power of all. There's something unshakable about a person who acts from dignity. Their energy feels controlled, deliberate, almost untouchable. You can insult them, ignore them, betray them, yet they will not react with chaos. Their silence will haunt you more than their words ever could. Because silence forces people to face themselves. It reflects their noise back at them. That's why those ruled by pride often fear the dignified, because dignity cannot be manipulated. It cannot be provoked. It cannot be guilted or flattered into reaction. It stands still, unbothered, self-contained, and that calmness drives the insecure mad. Pride wants to dominate. Dignity simply observes. Pride needs attention. Dignity commands it naturally. Pride demands to be respected. Dignity makes respect inevitable. Pride fights to be understood. Dignity accepts being misunderstood. Because dignity doesn't need external validation to confirm internal truth. When you reach that level of inner authority, you begin to move differently. You stop negotiating your boundaries. You stop over-explaining your silence. You stop participating in arguments that steal your peace. You realize that losing someone who disrespected your value isn't a loss, it's alignment. Pride keeps you emotionally tied to what hurt you. Dignity releases you. It cuts the invisible cords that bind you to old pain. That's why dignity heals, because it ends the cycle of self-betrayal. It teaches you that real strength is not about holding on, but about letting go with grace. Pride clings to control. Dignity trusts timing. Pride wants outcomes now. Dignity allows truth to unfold naturally. Pride rushes to prove. Dignity waits and watches. That patience isn't passivity. It's intelligence. It's understanding that truth always rises, that karma needs no assistant, and that silence is often the most eloquent response. People with dignity don't chase apologies. They embody closure. They know that the moment you stop demanding accountability from others and start practicing it with yourself, you rise above the entire situation. You step out of the emotional chaos that pride lives in and enter the psychological clarity that dignity thrives in. And in that clarity, something beautiful happens. You stop resenting people for who they are and start respecting yourself for how you responded. You realize that your reaction defines your energy far more than their action defines your worth. Pride is reactive energy. Dignity is reflective energy. One keeps you trapped in cycles of pain. The other liberates you through awareness. Every time you choose dignity, you are rewiring your mind away from ego and toward wisdom. You are teaching your subconscious that you no longer need to fight for peace. You are peace. That's the highest level of power, because the moment you stop fighting for respect, you start embodying it, and that embodiment changes everything. Your silence becomes authority. Your detachment becomes magnetism. Your composure becomes your signature. You stop chasing control because you realize you already have it, not over others, but over yourself. And that is enough. The proud constantly search for recognition. The dignified radiate it. The proud chase validation. The dignified attract reverence. The proud demand respect. The dignified inspire it. Because true respect cannot be forced. It can only be felt. It is the natural response to integrity, and integrity is dignity's twin. They walk hand in hand, invisible but undeniable. That's why dignity will always outlast pride. Pride exhausts itself trying to be seen. Dignity remains powerful, even unseen. Pride needs witnesses. Dignity needs none. Pride seeks revenge. Dignity trusts justice, not human justice, but the silent justice of time. And time, though patient, is ruthless with truth. Pride eventually exposes itself. Dignity never has to. So when you find yourself tempted to defend your worth to someone blind to it, pause. Ask yourself if it's pride or dignity that's speaking. Pride shouts because it's insecure. Dignity stays silent because it's certain. Pride wants to win the moment. Dignity wants to win the lifetime. That is the psychological divide between the fragile and the free. The fragile need attention to feel alive. The free draw strength from inner calm. To live with dignity is to stop performing and start being. It's to stop fighting battles that only the ego cares about. It's to step out of noise and into self-mastery. Pride is addiction to validation. Dignity is freedom from it. And freedom, once you taste it, becomes non-negotiable. You begin to protect your energy like a sacred currency, because you understand that not everyone deserves access to your peace. You stop reacting to every insult because you realize that people only throw stones when they feel small in your presence. You stop trying to explain your silence because only the loud misunderstand quiet power. Pride is immature strength. Dignity is mature control. Pride hurts because it screams to be heard. Dignity heals because it listens. Pride reacts to emotion. Dignity channels it. Pride divides you from yourself. Dignity reunites you. The healing begins the moment you no longer need to be right, only real. Because being real means being in alignment with your truth, not in competition with others. It means standing firm, without shouting, walking away without resentment, forgiving without weakness. That's dignity. Not something you perform, but something you become. And when you become it, everything around you begins to shift. The wrong people fall away. The right opportunities come quietly, and peace becomes your natural state. Pride wants noise. Dignity finds meaning in silence. Pride wants to impress. Dignity wants to express. Pride is fragile power. Dignity is eternal calm. And the day you understand this is the day you stop hurting and start healing. Pride is the ego's desperate attempt to feel alive through resistance, while dignity is the soul's quiet affirmation of life through acceptance. One is born of insecurity, the other of understanding. Pride tells you that letting go makes you small. Dignity reveals that letting go is how you become vast. Pride wants to win every interaction. Dignity doesn't compete at all. The proud live in constant tension, haunted by the fear of being overlooked or disrespected. Their entire existence is a reaction to how the world perceives them. The dignified, however, live in quiet ease. They are unbothered, not because they feel superior, but because they have nothing left to prove. They know that the loudest defense often hides the deepest doubt. They've outgrown the need to correct others' perceptions. They've discovered that being misunderstood by others is nothing compared to misunderstanding yourself. That's what pride does. It makes you a stranger to your own depth. You become addicted to external validation, disconnected from your inner compass. Dignity brings you home. It reminds you that peace is not something to find, it's something to protect, and it cannot coexist with pride. Pride wants the last word. Dignity wants inner silence. Pride wants control. Dignity wants coherence. Pride argues. Dignity accepts. It's not resignation, it's transcendence. To live with dignity is to stop negotiating with chaos. It's to recognize that you don't owe every insult a response, you don't owe every misunderstanding an explanation, and you don't owe every loss your pain. Dignity is the art of choosing what deserves your energy. It's saying, not everything requires my participation, because your presence, your attention, your reaction, they are currencies, and every time you spend them on pride, you end up bankrupt of peace. That's the irony. Pride promises power but leaves you powerless. It keeps you reactive, always defending, always explaining. Dignity doesn't need defense. It is self-evident. You can't fake it. You can't force it. You can only earn it through self-awareness and restraint. People who act with dignity have a calm that unsettles others. It's not arrogance, it's clarity. It's the look in the eyes of someone who has seen pain, been disrespected, misunderstood, yet refused to become bitter. That is real power. The ability to stay kind, stay quiet, stay grounded when the ego screams for chaos. Pride destroys relationships. Dignity redefines them. Pride says, they must understand my value. Dignity says, I must never forget it. Pride holds grudges to maintain control. Dignity forgives to reclaim freedom. Forgiveness is not about others. It's about you not allowing the wound to become your identity. That's what dignity teaches, that revenge is not strength, it's attachment. The real power is indifference born from closure within, and closure does not come when they apologize, it comes when you no longer need them to. Dignity is that moment of inner arrival, when your peace no longer depends on external correction. That's when you begin to live differently. You no longer react to everything that provokes you. You don't chase, you don't argue, you don't beg. You become intentional with your silence. You start to understand that silence is not avoidance, it's protection. It shields your energy from what's unworthy of it. The person of dignity knows that most conflicts are not worth entering because they cost too much of what cannot be regained: time, focus, equilibrium. That's what pride never learns. Pride would rather lose peace to prove a point. Dignity would rather lose an argument to preserve its composure. The difference is evolution. The proud fight to be superior, the dignified rise to be free. You see this difference everywhere, in how people handle rejection, betrayal, or disrespect. Pride seeks to mirror pain back. Dignity absorbs it and transmutes it into wisdom. Pride says, they hurt me, I'll make them pay. Dignity says, they hurt me, I'll make sure I never allow that energy near me again. One repeats cycles, the other breaks them. That's why pride keeps people trapped in endless emotional loops. They keep fighting ghosts, reliving old wounds, feeding old narratives. Dignity ends that loop by walking away from what no longer evolves it. That is the quiet revolution of maturity, the refusal to let pain dictate your behavior. Pride believes that dominance is power. Dignity knows that self-control is. There is a rare kind of authority in a person who can remain calm in the face of disrespect, who can say nothing where others would shout, who can remain still where others would collapse. That kind of power cannot be learned through pride. It is earned through suffering consciously, because dignity is born the moment pride dies. You cannot have both. The death of pride feels painful at first, because it feels like losing part of yourself. You've spent years equating pride with strength. But what you're really losing is illusion. The illusion that your worth depends on reaction. When pride dies, peace is born. And peace is the most expensive currency of all, paid for by ego's surrender. That's why dignity feels so calm. It no longer needs to chase, it no longer needs to prove, it no longer needs to win. It simply is. And that state of being commands the deepest respect. People can't manipulate what doesn't react. They can't provoke what doesn't respond. They can't control what doesn't need validation. Dignity is emotional sovereignty. It is knowing who you are, what you value, and what you will not tolerate, and then living accordingly. You stop making announcements about your boundaries because you start enforcing them through behavior. You stop demanding respect because your silence already demands it. You stop trying to fix others because you understand that every moment spent fixing others is a moment stolen from your own alignment. Dignity restores that alignment. It brings you back to your core, where your power is clean, your intentions clear, and your peace sacred. Pride contaminates that power because it's reactive. Dignity refines it because it's conscious. The dignified person moves differently. Their calm presence unsettles the proud because it reminds them of what they lack: control. That's why people ruled by pride will try to provoke those with dignity. They need to pull them down to chaos to feel in control again. But the person with dignity doesn't descend. They know that to react is to regress. So they stay still, and that stillness disarms everything. Because nothing terrifies the insecure more than someone who can't be emotionally moved. That's the paradox. The less you react, the more control you gain. The more you explain, the more power you lose. Pride explains endlessly because it's desperate to be understood. Dignity explains once, if at all, and then moves on. It understands that those committed to misunderstanding you are not your audience, and silence is the only language they deserve, that silence is not empty. It's layered with meaning. It says, I see you, I understand, but I'm no longer available for this energy. It's the voice of clarity, not coldness. It's what you reach when you've outgrown emotional noise. Pride hurts because it keeps you dependent on chaos. Dignity heals because it thrives in peace. That's the evolution we all face, and from emotional dependency to emotional independence. From reaction to reflection. From needing to be right to needing to be whole. When you reach that level of inner composure, you stop losing yourself in temporary storms. You become like the ocean, calm on the surface, but with unfathomable depth beneath. People mistake your calm for indifference, but it's not. It's awareness. It's the understanding that your reaction is your power, and your silence is your sword. Pride cuts outward and bleeds itself. Dignity cuts inward and refines itself. Pride screams for attention, dignity becomes attention itself, and in that transformation, you become untouchable. Because when your peace becomes your priority, no insult can shake you, no rejection can break you, and no loss can define you. That is when you finally understand. Pride hurts because it tries to control life. Dignity heals because it flows with it. Pride is the armor of the wounded. It's the mask you wear when you're terrified of being seen as vulnerable, and yet that same armor keeps love, peace, and healing from reaching you. Dignity is different. It doesn't build walls, it builds presence. It doesn't scream, "Don't hurt me." It whispers, "You can't." That's the silent difference between living through pain and living through power. Pride makes you hard, dignity makes you whole. One is resistance, the other is restoration. And if you look closely, every conflict in your life has been a battle between those two forces. The part of you that wants to prove, and the part of you that wants to heal. The more you evolve, the more you realize that proving is just another form of suffering. Every time you argue to be seen, every time you react to defend your worth, every time you try to control someone's perception of you, you are handing them power. Dignity reclaims that power. It doesn't fight for validation. It dissolves the need for it entirely. It understands that being unseen does not diminish your light. It only reveals who was blind. That's why the path of dignity feels lonely at first. You will walk away from arguments that once defined you. You will stop explaining yourself to those who never listened. You will stop lowering your standards to keep connections that drain you. You'll learn the sacred art of withdrawal, not as escape but as evolution, because sometimes silence is not distance, it's elevation. It's a sign that you've outgrown the level of conversation where pride lives. Pride needs drama to feel alive. Dignity thrives in quiet. Pride tries to rewrite the story. Dignity accepts that the truth doesn't need editing. Pride seeks revenge. Dignity seeks redemption. Pride acts out of impulse. Dignity acts out of purpose. When you live with dignity, your reactions slow down. Your thoughts deepen, and your emotions mature. You stop letting your pain speak for you. You start letting your peace do the talking. You begin to realize that calmness is not passivity, it's precision. It's the ability to aim your energy where it actually matters, because dignity is not about never feeling anger. It's about choosing not to be owned by it. You still feel everything, but you no longer act from everything. That's the difference between emotional chaos and emotional command. Pride is the noise of the ego. Dignity is the language of the soul. The ego always wants to be right. The soul only wants to be free. And that's why pride hurts. It chains you to the endless pursuit of being right. Dignity breaks that chain and whispers, you don't need to win. You just need to be at peace with yourself. The day you realize that, you stop chasing closure from people who don't even have it within themselves. You stop expecting accountability from the unaware. You stop explaining silence to those addicted to noise. You simply step back and life starts to flow again, because life supports what aligns with truth, and dignity is truth in motion. The proud resist reality, the dignified work with it. When something ends, pride says, how dare they? Dignity says, it was time. Pride clings to control, dignity surrenders to wisdom, and surrender, though it sounds soft, is the ultimate act of strength. It takes power to let things unfold without forcing them. It takes courage to allow what's leaving to leave. Dignity understands this. Not everything lost is a loss. Some things disappear to create space for alignment. Some people walk away because their chapter in your story is over. Some silences arrive not to punish, but to protect. When you understand that, you stop fighting endings. You start honoring them. That's when healing truly begins, and not when you get what you wanted, but when you accept what needed to happen. Pride cannot do that. It's too attached to image and outcome. It wants the world to see it as victorious, even if it's internally broken. Dignity doesn't care about appearance. It cares about truth. It asks, does this decision preserve my peace, even if it costs me recognition? That's the real test of growth, because the mature mind values peace over pride every time. It knows that losing an argument is nothing compared to losing self-control. It knows that silence has more weight than shouting ever will. It knows that the energy you don't waste defending yourself becomes the energy that rebuilds you. That's why people who live with dignity radiate a different kind of strength. You can feel it. They have a stillness that speaks, a presence that settles chaos, a look that says, I've already made peace with your misunderstanding. They don't need to react because they've already responded internally. They've chosen to protect their inner world over the illusion of winning. That's emotional sovereignty, the highest form of freedom. And freedom is the end of all pride, because once you taste it, once you experience what it feels like to not be emotionally owned by others, you can never go back. You no longer crave being liked. You crave being aligned. You no longer fight for closure. You embody it. You no longer explain your silence. You wear it like armor. Dignity becomes your language, your posture, your default state. People who once confused your calm for weakness start to realize it's their chaos that's loud, not your peace that's quiet. And that realization humbles them, because dignity always teaches without speaking. It teaches through contrast. It reveals the emptiness of pride by existing fully in peace. That's why it heals. It doesn't just make you stronger, it makes you whole. Pride teaches you through pain. Dignity teaches you through presence. Pride isolates you in ego. Dignity connects you to truth. The lesson is simple, but few have the patience to learn it. Stop fighting to be understood and start living in a way that doesn't require explanation. Stop proving. Start becoming. Stop performing. Start being. The moment you understand that power doesn't come from how loud you can be, but from how little you need to say, You transcend pride entirely. You enter a different realm, one where control no longer means dominance, but discipline, where silence no longer means absence, but presence, where restraint no longer feels like loss, but liberation. That's what dignity gives you. The ability to stay rooted while the world spins. The ability to look at chaos and not absorb it. The ability to stand alone and not feel lonely. Because once your peace becomes your identity, you can't lose it to anyone's noise. You become untouchable. Pride tries to build that untouchability through intimidation. Dignity builds it through peace. Pride forces respect through fear. Dignity earns it through integrity. Pride fades the moment it's ignored. Dignity deepens the longer it's misunderstood. That's the difference between performance and presence. One demands, the other commands. And when you live from command, life bends differently around you. Opportunities align, the right people gravitate, the noise fades. Because dignity has frequency, a calm vibration that attracts only what matches it. You stop chasing, you start magnetizing, you stop defending, you start embodying. And that's when you realize the ultimate revenge for pride's wounds is not revenge at all. It's healing, it's peace. It's living so deeply aligned that the past no longer touches you. Pride hurts because it makes you live outward. Dignity heals because it brings you inward. Inward is where peace lives, where clarity resides, where power renews itself. Everything you were trying to get from others through pride, attention, validation, respect, you find within yourself through dignity. It was never about them. It was always about how much you valued yourself. Pride was the noise of not knowing who you are. Dignity is the silence that proves you've learned, and that's the final truth. Silence isn't weakness, it's arrival. It's the moment when you no longer need the world to mirror your strength because you've already met it within. Pride hurts, but dignity heals, because one keeps you fighting for worth, while the other reminds you that you already are it. If this truth resonates, it's because you've already started to wake up. Subscribe to us because real power doesn't shout, it whispers.